I can remember when I first started embroidering, I thought stabilizers were the most confusing
Stabilizers is like a
thing
dark art.
in the whole world. Because there isn't a real definite science to it either. I can only give you my experience and some general rules for you to follow. And then after that, you really do have to try. That if you go to a big box store that starts with a W and you get a non-branded name there, that stabilizer does not perform the way the other name branders do. It just doesn't. And you can tell almost immediately
Wumbo Mart?
when you open it up. You can even look at the stabilizer and it will look patchy. It's not even uniformly made. That's your first hint that it's a piece of crap. Because if the stabilizer isn't uniform, there's no way it's going to perform the way it should. So I'm going to teach you some basics and tell you how I like to use them. But again, they're guidelines.
Yeah, but I'm going to learn a lot because I do know that there is a lot to stabilizer.
Well, the first thing is why do we even need a stabilizer? You know, some people are like, well, it helps hold it in the hoop. That's not really why we use it. We use it because there's got to be a foundation to our fabric so that when we're putting those extra stitches in, it has something to go to. Not all fabric is capable of holding all stitches. Now, that being said, if you're embroidering on cork, I would argue I don't need a stabilizer for cork. Cork is very stable. Cotton is stable-ish. Knits are totally unstable.
And
if there's any stretch to it, that's an unstable fabric. A poorly digitized design, and they're out there, my friends, is a poorly digitized design. And no amount of stabilizer is going to save that design. I'm assuming you have a well-designed, a well-digitized design to start with. Can't help you if you get a crappy one. Let's make this simple. Because as you can see, there are zillions of stabilizers. Zillions, Eddie.
And that's just a few.
There's Cutaway.
Cutaway, Tearaway, and Washaway. Okay, those are the three categories that you need to put in your brain. And I'm going to tell you how you choose which one of those three categories. That's step one. Am I using a cutaway? Am I using a tearaway? Or am I using a washaway?
Okay.
That's step one. So, when do I use a cutaway? Brent says, always. No, not always.
No, he always says tearaway.
I say tearaway.
Okay, well, definitely not always. And I'm going to tell you why.
I'll tell you why I say tearaway, because I'm lazy and it's easier to tear it off than cut it off.
Here's where we use a cutaway. A cutaway is really the only permanent stabilizer we have. It is the only stabilizer that's not going to disappear when you laundry an item. And that includes quilts that are going to get washed.
Okay.
A tearaway is a temporary stabilizer. And as soon as you tear it away, or it goes through the laundry, it goes away. But anyway, so you want to use cutaway, especially if you're using a knit. Anything with a stretch. This is the most reliable way to hold a fabric. And you can see the one we like the best is what we call
no-show mesh.
No-show mesh.
And I think
okay?
Polypro mesh. It's got a couple different names.
Well, you have to be careful whether you buy the nylon version or the poly version, okay? Because one will melt if you hit it with the iron. So
Yes.
it is important for you to know which one you're purchasing.
Okay.
Because we don't want it to melt when we hit it with the iron.
Which one melts, the poly or the nylon?
The poly.
Okay.
So you want to use...
It will go...
You want to use a no-show mesh that's made of nylon. And tell you what, this stuff is super strong, okay? It's, I don't know, Eddie, if you can see, it's got these little waffle tire marks, I call it, in it, that makes it stable in both directions, okay? That's what's special about this stuff. It's made by many, many companies. It's also made in different weights, light, medium, and heavy. Okay, so anything that's going to get washed regularly, you want a cutaway. Anything that's stretchy, you want a cutaway. My favorite is the mesh, but it's not always mesh. It can also be...
There's a papery one.
Yeah, and this happens to be heavy, and this is a papery one.
And that's probably the one you see most commercial embroiderers use, is going to be that papery one.
Yes, this is true.
Yeah.
All right, now the third category is your favorite, Tearaway.
Well, this is the second category.
I'm sorry. When do I use it? Oh, good. He got a light. This is a medium. This is a medium. This is a heavy. We'll talk about how I know which one to use
Later.
later. When do I use these?
When you're embroidering.
I can use these when I don't have something that I'm going to wash frequently.
Okay.
I can use them when I have something that isn't a stretchy fabric, like a,
Wall hanging.
yeah, you wouldn't wash a wall hanging that often. A non-stretchy fabric like cotton. Some people even use it on the back of towels because they're going to pull the back out afterwards and you don't want to see it on the back. There are other options for that, but you'll see it used on that too. My favorite use of the Tearaway is in conjunction with another stabilizer. For instance, if I'm hooping up my Cutaway,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm noticing I'm getting a few more puckers than I would like,
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to add another permanent labor to my stabilizer. I just want to get it to come out really nice here. If
okay.
I cut a piece of Tearaway and I float it under my hoop
Mhm.
while I'm stitching, I get a remarkably different result. I will get it so no puckers appear here at all.
Okay.
I then tear this away. It's done its job. I don't need this anymore. And my product is still firmly stabilized by the Cutaway that's going to stay in
Okay.
the project. So my favorite use of the Tearaway is in conjunction with another stabilizer.
Okay. We learned something today.
When you're tearing away your Tearaway,
Mhm.
you're not going like this. You're not going, this is my row of stitches. I'm not doing this.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not doing this. I'm going away from my stitches.
Yep.
You have to remove it methodically by taking it away from the stitches you just stitched this way. Third kind of category is Washaway, which also I'm going to include Heataway.
Okay.
Washaway is typically used, or Heataway,
Yes.
it's typically used on lightweight fabrics or any time you want it to disappear. Washaway is as the really thin Washaway.
Mm-hmm.
You know, very thin. And I wanted to let you know that that's not necessarily true. If I'm doing a towel, for instance, I'm going to use this. This is a heavier
I
Washaway.
actually have a hard time sometimes telling if I don't have the labels on the bolt on the. I sometimes cannot tell the no-show mesh from the Washaway for some.
And this Washaway is really durable. So if I were making freestanding lace, I probably wouldn't use this. I'd use a thinner Washaway and probably 2 layers, to be honest with you. Or I would use one layer, and I'll give you some tips about soaking it out, too. I got tips for you that make life a whole lot easier.
No, it was warm.
So this is a temporary stabilizer. I use it when I don't want to see it when I'm done, and it will disappear.
No.
Heataway. I'm going to give you a tip about Heataway. Now, I'm not talking about toppings. We're going to talk about that later. Although, let me tell you, in a pinch, you can use this as a topper as well.
Yes.
Don't
In fact,
think you have to go out and buy special topping stabilizer.
when I first started embroidery, I used that for all my topping. I didn't realize it was a topper.
Yeah, you
I use that for
definitely,
everything.
definitely
The
can use
only
this.
upside to regular topper is it's cheaper.
Yeah, and usually thinner. Now on the Heataway, when we do a Heataway, if I'm embroidering on a fabric like a satin or a velvet, and I can't put water on it to get it away, but I don't want stabilizer to show, your Heataway is the way to go. Because you can apply heat, and
Yep.
it basically evaporates. It doesn't dissolve. The Heataway evaporates.
A lot.
All right, here's how, now I'm going to talk about how to get the best results with the stabilizer you've chosen. All right?
Mm-hmm.
This is something people don't register either, which cracks me up. But whenever possible, I want you to fuse the stabilizer to the back of your project. I don't want you to hoop a piece of stabilizer and hoop, say I'm doing a t-shirt. You see this all the time, and then where did it come out right? They hoop a stabilizer, probably a cutaway,
Yeah.
right, because it's a wearable, and then they hoop the t-shirt, and they go, huh, that didn't come out so good. Well, because you've got fabric and you got stabilizer.
And they're moving.
And
Independent,
they, yeah, and so whenever, ever you can, you want to fuse those together,
Now, I'm going to ask a question. I don't know if I'm going to cover this or not.
okay?
Is 505 an acceptable fuse?
It is an acceptable fuse. A temporary spray definitely is an acceptable fuse, but my first go-to is
Fusible
the
sta-
fusible stabilizer. For example, I don't want to do this in a quilt because I got batting I'm putting in it, but the no-show mesh comes as a fusible, and I love it. And you just fuse it on your shirts first, and then put them in the hoop, and you have the best foundation you can get.
Okay.
If you don't have the fusible, you can certainly put this in, spray it, put your object
Well,
on
if
top
I wanted,
of it.
because I know sometimes when you're doing wearables.
This is not batting in between. This
Yeah.
is
But so this is
fabric
just as a question
cutaway.
because I'm thinking in terms of if you're doing like a wearable like a shirt.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's much easier to not try and hoop it to just lay it on your stabilizer.
this is true.
And if I hit it with some 505, fuse it down,
Yep.
am I good to go?
Yes.
Okay.
You also, that is a good case of use of the sticky backs,
Yeah.
which we'll be talking about,
Yeah.
which I love, sticky backs, for the same reason. You're skipping the spray step, but it's allowing you to make sure your item is stably attached to your stabilizer.
Okay.
So, and every Cutaway, Tearaway, Washaway all have sticky back versions. They all do. So it's a matter of you deciding what you're trying to hoop. Also,
Is there a fusible heat away? You ironed it up.
heat and gone,
Yeah, fusible heat and gone.
you know, I bet you there is.
I would be curious to see.
I
There's
don't.
a wet and stick.
Yeah, there is a wet and
Floriana.
stick.
Yeah,
There's
that's
all
that
sorts
wet and
of-
stick heat and gone.
But the
But you don't
stickies-
have like a wet and stick water soluble because you're going to wet it to stick it and it's going to disappear. Anyway,
That's not true. That's not true. We have a sticky back Washaway right here. It's one of my favorite new stabilizers by Kimberbell.
do you wet it to stick it or do you peel
Nope,
the back off?
you stick it, and then when you go to take it off, you get rid of the stabilizer using water on the
Got the
back.
paper you peel.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
But like, but what I'm saying, like, so some that,
Oh, iron on.
yeah, like
Okay,
like an
yeah.
iron on, like you have to iron it on with heat.
I
and
really
then
like
it's-
the iron-ons. And another tip I'm going to get you, because we're all talking about using, if you're doing Kimberbell, they're all wanting you to use their interfacing, iron-on interfacing on all your blocks before
Yeah.
you even begin. Iron-on, iron-on mesh.
Okay.
As a general rule, I want you to hoop all four sides of your stabilizer. Now, people know when I'm in quilt class, sometimes they'll go, oh, you're using a magnetic hoop, you got 3 out of 4 hooped, you're good to go. That's not what I'm talking about here. I'm talking about you're doing a quilt block or shirt or whatever else you're doing. You're not quilting in the hoop. You really want to make sure you get all 4 sides of your stabilizer in the hoop. And you don't want them on the skinny. You want them sticking up at like a 1/2 inch. Don't get so cheesy on your stabilizer. Do not skimp on stabilizers, guys. It's not worth it. And I already talked about the multiple layer thing.
Yep.
Do not be afraid about doing multiple layers. And when I say that, I'm not talking about sticking multiple layers in the hoop. I'm still only going to put one piece of stabilizer in the hoop.
You're just going to float one on the back with
Float
tape
one on the
or
back,
whatnot.
on the
Okay.
back.
Yep.
Or sometimes I'll iron something on the product. I'll hoop a stabilizer. If I'm still not getting the results I want, I'll float one. That's 3 different ways I'm using to get a...
This thing's got way more
That's
complicated.
bad digitizing though,
No,
isn't it?
no, it could be a picture.
Oh.
You know,
Oh,
some of
that's
the
super
photo
thick,
stuff.
yep.
You need to really get yourself raring to go for those, or they're not going to come out nice. To Danny's question on when do I know when to use light, heavy, medium, and either one of these categories, I want you to look at the material you're embroidering. If it's a heavy material like a cap
Mm-hmm.
or a pair of jeans, I want you to choose the heavy stabilizer, the heavy Cutaway, the heavy Tearaway, the heavy Washaway.
Nice.
You as a rule of thumb, and there's always exceptions to every rule, but you go heavy material, heavy stabilizer, light material, light stabilizer. It's almost the
That makes it easy.
yeah, it's almost the opposite of what people want to do sometimes. They
Yeah.
go, I'm making lace, and it's going to be a mess if I don't use a heavy stabilizer. And I'm thinking, no, if you're working with something very light, you want to keep the stabilizer light.
Okay.
You don't want to.
It makes sense.
Yeah, no, it does.
It does, yeah.
It's the opposite of what I see people doing. I'm like, no, heavy, light, got it. Medium is probably the most often used one for our industry in here.
Because of the
Because of what
quilting
we
cotton
embroider.
is going to be
Yep.
usually medium weight. Yep.
The other thing, though, and that's why I say stitch count does matter.
See, here's my question on that, because I've seen charts where it's like, oh, I have so many stitches, use this. But the problem is, the amount of stitches in a 4x4 hoop,
Yep,
if it's the same amount of stitches and it's in a 8x10 hoop or a 8x12 hoop,
exactly.
if it's the same amount of stitches, the density is way different, so that rule doesn't hold up. Or
Here's
does it?
what I do. No, it doesn't. So
Okay.
here's what I do. I match to my material first.
Mm-hmm.
Then and don't be afraid to add stabilizer as you're going either. Stop your machine if you're going, oh, I see a little pucker happening right there. Stop your machine. Float another piece underneath it. Don't think you have to scrap it and start all over again. You've just got one tiny little area you're not happy with. Guess what? There's going to be more. If there's one, there's going to be more. Stop your machine and that's the floating is a huge way to save
Yeah,
your designs. Huge way.
that makes sense, yeah.
So don't be afraid to stick that underneath there. And then, because
But
you
the
got to
sti-
think about stitch count, but I can't choose a stabilizer based on
Okay,
stitch
thank
count.
you for saying that, because that's what I've seen charts. There's a chart out there that says if it has this to this many stitches, heavy versus light, but that chart never made sense to me because it's density. It's not necessarily
Yeah.
the count of the stitches,
Stitches,
it's how dense those
exactly.
stitches are.
Exactly. And in that case, I'm going to vote for multiple layers.
Yeah.
I'm not going to necessarily say, give me that heavy cutaway now, because I don't want that feel when I'm done.
Yeah,
So that's when I would vote for a
Okay.
multiple layer.
that makes sense.
You have to have a stash. Okay. Don't be afraid to float items either. You can't hoop every item. You can't hoop a onesie. I see people do it and I go, why are you doing that? So definitely hoop your stabilizer and then use one of the adhesion methods we've
Yep.
already talked about. Get a sticky back stabilizer for that onesie or use your 505. Get that foundation down really good and you're good to go. Likewise, sometimes you'll see I hoop the item, but not the stabilizer.
Oh, okay.
Because sometimes I've got an interfacing or a fusible on the back of my item already,
Yep.
and I want it nice and taut,
Yeah.
but it's already pretty stable. So I'm going to hoop that, and then I'm going to float the stabilizer. So you can float either one, is what I'm trying to say.
Okay.
And don't be afraid to do it. Just know you have to anchor it down. Some people use pins, too, to pin it in place. Pins are helpful, but it is not the same as using a sticky back. When you use a sticky back, you've got that thing, or 505. I
Yeah.
personally don't like 505 because it's messy.
I just use it as kind of a
But
catch-all
it's,
brand
a
for
lot of
spray
people
adhesive, yeah.
swear by it and
Yeah,
love
there's a
it.
couple other versions of 50, other brands
I'd rather
of it,
use a
but
sticky back stabilizer, and I'm going to tell you a way to save money on that.
did we
Too.
talk about toppers?
Toppers. Toppers are really underrated, people. I'm going to throw a challenge out there. I want you to start using toppers more and more and see if you notice a difference in your designs.
And I will say one of the things about the toppers specifically are very inexpensive as far as stabilizer
They're
goes.
inexpensive, and your lines will be so much
And you don't
sharper.
have to hoop them. You can just throw it on there,
You
right?
don't hoop them. I've seen people hoop them. I don't know why you would do that. You can literally throw them on there, or you can tape them on there if you're like me and you want them to just
If you're like
stay
me,
put.
you just throw it on there.
Throw in there. The purpose of that topper is to create a barrier between your fabric and your stitches. So normally we think of only using it when we have something with a pile,
Yep.
and we don't want the stitches to sink in. Well, guess what? A t-shirt, anything with a little,
Little bit.
I'm
Okay.
telling you, I used it on t-shirts and they come out amazingly different. And I'm talking regular big appliques and regular big lettering. But it keeps
I can
the
see.
stitches on top of the fabric instead of sinking into the fabric.
Okay.
Now, sometimes I want my stitches to sink in, like when I'm using a batting or something like that. But most often I do not. And the toppers are very inexpensive. And speaking of toppers, something I've discovered with this one with all the nasty words on it. And I'm going to give you some hints on Washaway toppers soon. It's not in here, so. But try them on nearly everything.
Yeah.
I think you will be you'll go, what? And I'll tell you how to easily get them off after. But I want to specifically
Let's talk about the heat
point
because
out the heat that you have to apply to remove it is a much higher heat than the warm water in your washing machine, or the
Okay.
hot water in your washing machine, or even the air in your dryer.
okay.
So when you have this underneath your stitches and you don't iron, press, hold
Yeah.
it there for a little while, let it evaporate. It
Yeah.
does. It doesn't evaporate from underneath your design. It
Okay.
does not. It stays there because it needs contact of that heat to disappear. Let's say you're using this on a towel.
Yeah.
I'm not kidding. This is amazing. We usually reach for the Washaway topper,
Yeah.
right? That's what we've been told. Wash that towel 10 times.
It's gone.
All of a sudden, all the little pieces of your towel are coming up through
Okay.
because it's a Washaway.
Uh,
It
but,
washes away.
but that one takes direct heat, so it's going to stay there forever.
This one stays there.
Okay.
Now here comes my tips.
Okay. Tips.
I know I like sticky back. Some people don't. They are more money, but I'll tell you what, they can also save you money. And I covered this on a show before. When I'm hooping a sticky back, I'm hooping this whole thing with sticky back. I'm then doing one little section.
Yep. Just
One
touch
little
the whole-
section.
Yeah.
And because it's sticky back, I don't have to take it out of my hoop and rehoop the whole thing.
Yep.
I can cut a small piece of sticky back, stick it over that hole, and I'm back in business.
Okay. Nice.
So you don't end up wasting all of this over and over again.
Mhm.
Okay? Now, this next tip comes from Danny. And I actually really
And if there's
it.
a frugal person, it is Danny.
I will
Danny,
teach you all about saving pennies.
Danny says, hey, keep your stabilizer on the roll. The stabilizers aren't cheap, but you can't cheap out on them either, people, though. You're going to get crappy results if you do. Danny likes to do this. Danny likes to put her stabilizer in.
Nope. Put it towards this. There you go.
Well, okay.
Why that way versus the other way?
I think this weighs more on this particular
On
size.
that size.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, so
okay.
basically what she's doing, and if it's a smaller roll, she's going this way. Becky's got a bigger roll, so she's going
I
this
put it
way.
in front of the machine. That's why.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Do I?
And then you actually embroider with it in the roll,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
then cut
I
it
think that's
after.
a great idea.
Yeah. Now what happens is
Well, now
she leaves this
listen.
attached
Yeah.
when she goes and embroiders. She likes to have
You
it.
have to flip it to the other side.
She likes
I
to
think.
have it in front of her normally.
Yeah.
No, I could just let it go on the floor.
No, but see, if it's like that, it's going to be on the underneath your
No,
in
this-
the arm. Yeah, because
Yeah,
it's going to go
okay.
in.
That's
Yeah.
All
why
right.
it's usually in front.
Yeah.
But
She likes to keep it in the front of her like this, okay? And then she does all her embroidery, and then she takes it out of the hoop.
I even moved the design.
Okay, I didn't cover that, but I bet you do.
Look at girl.
And then
I'll cover that too. And then she cuts the stabilizer. Now, what she is able to do is instead of cutting a piece this big to put in the hoop, if she moved her design all the way over here,
she can then just cut.
she
cut
takes it
there.
off and maybe her design ended here. So now she's using literally half the stabilizer.
It's an interesting trick.
But it depends on the design. 'cause
It does,
If
but-
you're taking it in and out with an applique, it's
Yeah,
a little
yeah.
less.
A little,
Yeah.
yeah. So that's, but tearaway tearaway. Sticky back may become your friend in those cases because you don't have to hoop the whole thing again
Yep.
to get it to work. So anyway, that was that. And you were talking about I can't tell what's what.
Keep your labels.
Keep your labels inside your
Yep.
rolls.
I think that's a great, yeah.
The Kimberbell, you're right, they're color coded, but once that label comes
Yeah.
off, if you haven't bought the wristband, you still don't know what
Yeah,
you
you
got.
gotta, you put the label,
So
yeah.
you can put it in there. And at home, I actually have Cutaway, Tearaway.
Of course you do.
Washaway.
Of course you do.
Separate bins for everything.
Batting a
Batting
yes.
as a stabilizer. A lot of times in our heads, we don't think of them as stabilizers, but they are.
Yes.
And
Some battings will work better than others.
exactly, Kimberbell's project batting,
Yeah.
great stabilizer. Gives you that little bit of fluff, so you gotta want that. Hoop Sisters Battleizer, which is very similar to Quilter's Dream 80-20.
And I think Quilter's Dream also does a 70-30. That's a
I haven't had experience with that, but the 80-20 I really like.
Yeah, I
okay, now I've told you I like toppings, so I'm going to give you a tip for removing the Washaway topping. Which, by the way,
85-15. Whose is that? Kimberbell's is 85-15. Yeah,
85-15.
That's about right. Yeah.
Yeah. So Kimberbell, Washaway, Cinnamon has this as topping, so it's less money. But I've already told you can use your regular Washaway in a pinch. No, it's more money, but
Yep.
one's thinner, I think. You get it on the product, and what people hate is getting it off the product. Now, I just told you, hey, consider using it more often. And people go, ugh, then I have to take it off. I don't want to take it off. There's some easy ways to take it off. One way is that after your product comes out, your item comes out, take a good quality paper towel, not like the kind you buy, like a Bounty, okay? Cover your design with your Bounty.
That was awesome.
Spritz it with water, right? We all got water, handy dandy. Spritz it with water. Take your iron the wet paper towel on your products.
Okay.
Then you will see that the paper towel is almost stuck, but not stuck. When you carefully peel that paper towel away, it takes all the water soluble with it, including the nook and crannies.
Oh, cool.
So that's much easier than dunk, dunk, dunk.
Yeah.
The other thing that I love doing, and it must be because, I'm weird, water soluble sticks to water soluble. It's like a magnet to one another. So let's say you've removed all your extra water soluble around your design. Then I spritz my design with water. I'm not dunking it, I'm spritzing it, okay? Then I take the water soluble that I've already taken off, and I stick it over my design, and I press it.
And it'll pull off.
And then you pull it off quick like a Band-Aid. Everything comes off.
That's awesome.
Nice.